Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, as the US broker a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, we report on the latest breaches and discuss why the Punjab forms such an important part of the equation to finding lasting peace in the region. In Canada, the New Brunswick Naga Kirtan finally went ahead despite a maelstrom of public argument across social media, highlighting the many struggles modern Sikhs have to educate the wider public. In the UK, another emergency meeting with a huge turnout is held over the weekend as more and more cases of child grooming is reported within the British Sikh community. And talking of conflict, 314 years ago today, Baba Banda Singh Bahadur achieved a decisive victory over the Mughal hordes, forming a significant milestone in the history of Sikhs. We look at the Battle of Chappar Chiri and why it was so important. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good Monday to you. I hope everybody had a great weekend and keep those amazing comments coming in. And we'd love to get our followers and subscribers up to 30,000. So spread the word. Let's help us get to that magical number. Back to you, Angus.
Well, actually, James, I'm delighted to report I did see over the weekend we're over, I think, up to 32,000. So we have indeed reached that milestone.
Oh, well, we had a big jump then because, I thought we were still at just around 28,000, so I must have missed some of the numbers.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of interest with the...
Well, let's hit 40,000 then.
Yeah, okay. So let's get to 40,000. Thank you to our wonderful audience. Spread the good word. Because James and I together, we bring you on a daily basis our opinions and perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And today, as usual, we'll be taking a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, which will be affiliated below the video. So thank you as always for those. Right, James, loads to get through today. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, let's start off with New Brunswick, a small maritime province in the east coast of Canada. Beautiful, beautiful area, but quite small. And they were looking to have their parade this weekend. Now, they applied for the permits and all of the consents from the community in the province back in March. But unfortunately, there were delays and concerns over security, over closure of other businesses in the area. Now, of course, it's not as big as of a Sikh community as we have in Surrey, where the majority of businesses that close for the parade here are actually Sikh-owned, so it doesn't have such an impact on the outerlying community. However, with that said, of course, there were other incidences in which there were concerns. One of them being security, because there were some racial comments online, in addition to a window being smashed out in the local Gurdwara. So, of course, that had triggered some concerns as well. As I said, in addition to the local businesses concerned about closing down on Mother's Day here in Canada. So again, the restaurants and that are usually very, very busy on days like this, especially Mother's Day, one of the busiest of the year. With that said, things did actually go forward as planned. They ended up closing down half of the street instead of the full street. The city finally came to the table and spoke with the Sikh organizing committee, as well as other parties involved, and everybody came to a very amicable solution to it. And the parade went on without any incidences. Now, unfortunately, I did not get any images or videos that I was able to get consent to use on the show tonight, so I just pulled up a couple from the Surrey event just to show how welcoming and how open this is. One of the other concerns that we saw in New Brunswick that we did not see in Surrey, of course, was the carrying of the swords. And that, of course, we know is a very sacred part of Sikhi. And this basically came up because people don't understand the actual meaning and the symbolism of that. So again, it was also an opportunity to not only try to make sure that the concerns were alleviated, but to educate the public as well. Now, as it went, everything went safely, comfortably, and of course successfully, because of the fact that everybody realized that it was an open and welcoming community, that it was not only the Sikh community involved, but that everybody was welcome. There was, of course, languor and all of that you would expect at such an event. So it went very well. They had about 2,000 people there, and again, that's a sizable turnout for being in the Maritime Provinces and a small town as it was. The other benefit is that when we look at these type of cultural events, whether it's the Sikhs, whether it is Muslim, whether it is anybody else, it shows that through dialogue and conversation, the concerns can be alleviated by everybody coming together to find a workable solution. And that's what happened. So again, that was in Shediac Bridge in New Brunswick, and they had a great turnout. They ended up with a great day, and again, like many others, we hope that everybody has created some amazing memories and also educated themselves about Sikhi. With that said, there was also an event in Calgary, which was very successful today as well. Angus?
Yeah, that's great. It's very challenging for the diaspora in certain areas. I mean, when you talk about places like Surrey and places in California, and even here in the UK, Leicester and such places that have large Sikh populations, it's a lot easier for them to organise these parades, these wonderful festivals and things, because their communities are very well established, they have the numbers, and of course the wider community are better educated about what it's all about. But when you do come to the smaller areas in the diaspora, you know, your heart goes out to them a little bit, where you've got much smaller populations of Sikhs in those areas, and New Brunswick clearly a demonstration of this. It's very harder for them to establish their traditional processions and their cultural identity, things that they need to do on a regular basis, because the wider community doesn't understand. They don't know. They've never had the benefit of such an education. Education, of course, once again being the key word here, is that they're always a little bit suspicious, because these smaller communities are by definition a very small minority, and anything is always treated with suspicion by the wider community. Who are these people? What are they doing? What are they representing? And of course, they are reserved, they're worried, and of course, on the far extremist side, there are those who are willing and quite able on social media to wade in and start throwing mud around and saying, oh no, we don't want these people in our community. Who are they? What do they represent? And this is where the larger communities have succeeded in educating the wider community, saying, look, this is who we are peaceful, we represent something very powerful and very good. And of course, they're readily accepted. Once people understand what Sikh is all about, of course, they're very quickly accepted, and people even join in from the wider community. They're happy to celebrate, whether it's Vaisakhi or whatever. And so, again, you do feel for these smaller communities, as ably demonstrated in New Brunswick, where they said, look, we want our Naga Kirtan. And of course, across social media, immediate suspicions. Who are these people? What are they doing? What do they represent? There is this fear, this natural human nature fear of these people. And again, New Brunswick had done very well to go out there and fight back and say, look, no, this is who we are. This is who we represent. And hopefully, once the Naga Kirtan is established as a regular event, people from the wider community see, okay, it's okay. These people are good people. They are peaceful people. They're not something that's causing us any threat to our community. Quite the opposite. And I have no doubt that once the langar is heard about in the Gurdwaras, is again more people understand what Sikh is all about, and it is here to improve humanity. And I think, again, that's all part of this wider, more lateral approach to the wider community to say, look, no, this is who we are. We are good people. We represent a religion that brings goodness, represent all the moral values, and of course it overlaps many of the default religions of places like this, whether it's Christianity or whatever, and say, look, no, we share the same values, but we also interpret things in a slightly different way, and this is what Sikh is all about. And again, it spreads the goodness, and that being again a key word here. So yeah, well done to the community in New Brunswick, and it must be difficult for the diaspora in certain parts of Europe, and certainly in Australia and New Zealand, where again, the numbers are much smaller than, let's say, in Canada and the US. They face these constant challenges, and it is very hard for them to not just establish themselves within the local communities, but to then try and enjoy their cultural situations like Vaisakhi or whatever it is. So James, I think well done to the community in New Brunswick for achieving that against clearly overwhelming odds.
Absolutely. And again, it just shows the misconceptions and the lack of education and awareness when it comes to the use of the kirpan as a symbolic part of the religion. And I think that this helped to really educate the local community on the significance of the kirpan for Sikhs. So I think that at the end of the day, everything went well, and hopefully the community has grown more for it. And there are also those within the political sphere that say that it could actually be a foundation for future cultural events in the way that they came together to find the solutions for the small town. So that was great. I think that overall it turned out well. It's unfortunate that they had to wait until Thursday to get their permit to have it, because that left a lot in limbo and a lot of stress, I'm sure, but they pulled it off. So congratulations to everybody involved, and they should be proud that it went well and successfully. And as we talk about being proud and being Sikh, we look at this day in history, the Battle of Chappar Chiri, which is a very significant historical event for the Sikh people and the Sikh calendar. Now, here is an image that came up that was from an author, Pankachir. I'm not even going to bother pronouncing that. I might insult him. But anyway, beautiful image of the battle in itself. But what exactly was it? On May the 12th, in 1710, a few years before I was born, the Battle of Chappar Chiri, also referred to as the Battle of Sirhind, unfolded in the Mohali region, 20 kilometers from Sirhind, marking a significant chapter in Sikh history. The battle saw Sikh forces, led by Baba Banda Singh Bahadur, achieve a decisive victory over the Mughal army under Nawab Wazir Khan. He was the governor of Sirhind, who was killed during this conflict. Now, the battle was rooted in the Sikh community's struggle against the Mughal oppression, particularly the execution of Guru Gobind Singh's younger sons, and that was Zorawar Singh, age 6, and Fateh Singh, age 9, by Wazir Khan in 1704. Following the Battle of Anandpur Sahib, this act, coupled with ongoing Mughal tyranny, galvanized the Sikhs. Guru Gobind Singh, before his death in 1708, appointed Banda Singh Bahadur, a baptized Sikh leader, to lead the fight for liberation. Banda Singh Bahadur, marched to Punjab in October 1708 with 25 Khalsas and others to unite Sikhs under his leadership, setting the stage for the confrontation at Chappar Chiri. And this goes on that the captured certain towns that were known to be key locations, and they went to weaken the bases of the Mughal support, and also the Sikh army organized into two jathas, and that went on to the whole fight of itself, in which the Sikhs became the warriors, or not the warriors, but the victors, sorry. So when they succeeded, of course, it became a very pivotal moment within Sikh history, and that victory is remembered today. Now, research suggesting that 25 to 30,000 Sikhs and 20 to 25,000 Mughals involved, and that's a quite significant number back at that date. But while some sources actually support the fact that they claimed 20,000 Sikh and 60,000 Mughal casualties, though the latter figure may be exaggerated. The battle's outcome was a resounding Sikh success, with Wazir Khan's death marking a significant blow to the Mughal authority. Following the battle on May the 14th, 1710, the Sikhs besieged and captured Sirhind, plundering 52 lakh rupees and razing the city. The victory led to the establishment of the first Sikh state. And again, just wait, it's going to be reminiscent when we see Khalistan formed as an independent state It will hopefully be under the same guise of peace, unity, and equality for everyone who lives within Khalistan when it happens. Now, this, of course, was setting up the capital, and that was done in Logar in Haryana, marking the first territorial conquest south of the Satluj River to Delhi. So again, very interesting, and I've included some other facts here as well. I'm going to just kind of skip through those because we are on a time crunch as usual, but I will just scroll slowly down the screen so that if you are interested, you're more than welcome to just pause your screen and read a bit more about the amazing Battle of Chappar Chiri and learn about that history and the importance not only to Sikh identity, but the relevance to contemporary Punjab. Angus.
Yes, as we often say, Sikh history is full of these fascinating and heroic sort of battles that form such great stories. And we often talk about, when we talk about the film industry and Hollywood and indeed the Punjab film industry, we say there are these incredible stories, heroic battles that form part of the Sikh history. And these stories need to be told before they get forgotten about. Of course, the Sikh community do hold all the archives and they do record these things, but the wider world are really unaware of so many of these huge battles. And of course, this ongoing battle that went on for at least a couple of centuries, around the 18th century, between the Mughals and the Sikhs. The Sikhs, of course, were it really was the time when they were growing in prominence, they were growing in power, and it was those years before the original Sikh empire was established. And it was a series of evolutions of these tribes, these bands of Sikhs who, over time, these missals, as they were called, these militia, were eventually organised into one united force, which in turn created the Sikh Empire. And it's those battles leading up to the establishment of the original Sikh Empire that is this fascinating time when almost like, I suppose, almost like in astronomy, when all these nebula spin round nuclei to become stars, which in turn sort of grow into big galaxies. Essentially, that's what happened with the Sikh Empire. There was these tiny little nebulous groups, these missiles that all then started coalescing, started joining together into bigger and bigger bands, which in turn eventually was united into the Sikh Empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So it's a fascinating time, and battles like this were obviously those key milestones in defeating the Mughal hordes. And of course, let's not forget the Hindus and the Brahmins, who were very much in existence around these times, and they too came up against the Mughals. But ultimately, the only time that the Hindus were friendly towards the Sikhs was when the Hindus were literally facing their own existential crisis, when the Mughals were poised to defeat the Hindus and the Brahmins, is that they then came to the Sikhs and said, look, would you fight with us? Would you ally with us to fight with the Mughals? That's the only time really that suddenly they needed the Sikhs, which I think says an awful lot. So again, James, a fascinating history. I think this battle, as indeed many battles like it, were these key milestones as part of that evolutionary process that ultimately led on into, not long after, into the establishment of that original Sikh empire. So they form these fascinating stories.
Absolutely, Angus. And speaking of stories, and we're talking Hollywood, there was actually an animated program that really told the tale well and was well received. And that was a bit older. It's about 8 years old now. But I thought I'd show the trailer anyway. If anybody is interested, they can see the trailer, but they can find it on YouTube and other sites as well to watch the full program. So let's take a look here at that. It is in Punjab, so I don't understand the words, and I wasn't able to translate it right away, but let's take a look here, Angus.
ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੌਤ ਹੋਰਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਪ੍ਰੇਰਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣ ਸਕਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਹੋਣ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ। ਮਰਨਾ ਉਸੇ ਦਾ ਸਫਲ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦੂਸਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਰਨ ਦੀ ਜਾਚ ਸਿਖਾ ਦੇਵੇ। ਬੰਦਾ ਗੁਰ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਲੈ ਤੁਰਿਆ। ਮਾਧੋ ਦਾਸ ਤੂੰ ਕਰਮਵੀਰ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਕਰਮ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਇਸ ਧਰਤੀ ਤੇ ਆਇਆ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਕਮਾਨ ਸੰਭਾਲ।
ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਸ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਬਣਾਓ ਜਿਹਦੀ ਤਲਵਾਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਬੇਗੁਨਾਹ ਤੇ ਉੱਠੇ ਨਾ ਤੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਪਾਪੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਖਸ਼ੇ ਨਾ।
ਮੈਂ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਪੂਰੇ ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਾ ਖਤਮ ਕਰ ਦੇਵਾਂ, ਜਦ ਤੱਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਜਿਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਮੇਰੀ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਜਿਉਂ ਦੀ ਤਿਉਂ ਬਣੀ ਰਹੇਗੀ।
ਜ਼ਾਲਿਮ ਵਜ਼ੀਰ ਖਾਨ, ਮਜ਼ਲੂਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਉਹ ਦੋਸਤ ਨੇ, ਨੇਕੀ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਹਿਚਾਨ ਹੈ। ਉਸ ਗੁਰੂ ਦਾ ਥਾਪੜਾ ਲੈ ਤੁਰਿਆ, ਬੰਦਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਰਹੰਦ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਿਉਂ ਮਰਨਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ?
ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਦੀ ਫੌਜ ਦੇ ਚਿੱਥੜੇ ਹਵਾ 'ਚ ਉੜਦੇ ਦੇਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਹਾਂ।
ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹਾਂ।
ਅੱਗੇ ਵਧੋ।
ਖੰਡਾ ਖੜਕਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਵੇਲਾ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਚਲੋ।
ਬੰਦੇ ਦਾ ਖੰਡਾ ਖੜਕੇਗਾ, ਬੰਦੇ ਦਾ।
ਵਜ਼ੀਰ ਖਾਨ,
So as you can see, it definitely is some great animation there, Angus, and I think that it was well received. It's actually had millions and millions of views on YouTube alone. So, I mean, I can just imagine the theaters with that level of animation. The sound was excellent, and I think that the powerful story that it tells, or the significant story, I think, yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. If you are on YouTube, you can find it there.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a commercial guy in the film industry, I mean, if an animation like that about the story is receiving millions of views, there's a huge market ready for a Hollywood treatment of that story. Clearly the story is of interest to so many millions of people. It only takes somebody with a little bit of intelligence from the Hollywood side to give that the full Hollywood treatment, and well, you've got a guaranteed success. So yeah, James, let's continue our appeal to the larger filmmakers of the world, saying you're always short of stories. Let's not have Marvel Part 37. Let's have something a bit more interesting and a bit more original. There's a whole rich seam of very fertile and exciting stories there to really tell the world. So
Absolutely.
anyway, let's move on, James.
It's got it all.
Absolutely right. Right, let's talk about modern conflict now, and of course the story of the Pakistan-India situation, which, as it turns out, over the weekend, indeed, as I'm sure everybody knows, a ceasefire has been brokered. That came into effect on 5 p.m. on Saturday morning. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Saturday afternoon, and it seems on the whole to have held. It was a ceasefire allegedly brokered by the United States. Trump was certainly very loud to claim credit for it, but apparently, according to Pakistan, well, Pakistan's own word, they said 36 countries were involved. I have no doubt, as we said last week, James, that every country, certainly in the G20, will have thrown their diplomatic weight into trying to find a very quick solution to bring these two countries back from the brink. Of course, both countries nuclear armed, so there's a lot of concern about where this could lead. And it does actually, I think, endorse one of the feelings we had last week, which is that really these countries, they don't want to go to war. Neither of them really wants to go to war. There was a suspicion that the whole thing was generated by Modi for political reasons, as so often happens when you have increasingly unpopular leaders. They always try to generate a bit of conflict to unite their nation behind them, even however unpopular they may be at the time. And of course, elections in Bihar coming up, so there were the accusations of that. So it's not surprising, actually, that both sides have managed to bring it back from the brink, fortunately. Having said that, there have been a few breaches, but all pretty minor stuff. There certainly hasn't been any large-scale breaches. It's all fairly localised, lobbing small arms fire across the border, the line of control. At the moment, as we speak, nothing larger than that. Pakistan, from their side, of course, both sides, unsurprisingly, quite belligerent in their position, saying we were right, no, we were right, etc., as you would expect. From Pakistan's side, they had dubbed their operation of retaliation as Bunyan ul Mahsus, excuse my Urdu pronunciation, meaning unbreakable wall. And that's an interesting choice of phraseology, because it implies that we are defensive. And I think that in itself just says what Pakistan's stance in this situation was, saying, you know, we were not the aggressors here. It was India that were the aggressors. And as we often say, all the evidence does seem to point the fact that India were the aggressors here. The whole original incident of Pahalgam, again, has been accused, in fact, by Pakistan of being a false flag. And interestingly, out in public media, out in the mainstream media, Pakistan has actually now publicly accused India of that very same thing. And they have actually said, they came out in a televised address, it was Major General Chowdhury, who also condemned the original strikes as a calculated attempt to sow discord between Sikhs and Pakistan, calling it a brutal act against India's own citizens. So ultimately, Pakistan have been accusing India of deliberately, not just in the original Pahalgam attack, but also the ensuing missile launches, of deliberately launching missiles into Amritsar and the Punjab, other areas of the Punjab, to blame Pakistan for that, when in fact they were India's attempts to stir up trouble and basically attack Sikhs, as is their modus operandi. And as part of that, Pakistan's military claims to have intercepted an Israeli-made Indian drone over Nankar Sahib, Janam Astan in Pakistan. The drone was reportedly conducting surveillance, further raising concerns over targeted attempts to destabilise Sikh-Pakistan relations. So it looks like India realises that the Punjab, particularly the Sikh community, are actually more aligned with Pakistan's stance in this situation rather than India. And of course, we do know Pakistan has been reaching the hand of friendship across to certainly the Indian Punjab and the Sikhs within, saying, look, we recognise that India has been persecuting you. We, on the other hand, will not persecute you. We will treat you as a minority that deserves respect. So interesting. Now, of course, there'll be a certain cynical element of deliberate provocation on the Pakistan side, but ultimately it does point to how important that the Punjab, whether in east or west of that border, how important it is, how important a pawn it is in this game of chess between India and Pakistan. Now, in the meantime, India has been positioning itself ready to launch a fairly major strike should it escalate. They actually moved their naval fleet around the port city of Karachi, the main port city of Pakistan. And they actually moved what's called their strike group, which include an aircraft carrier, destroyers, frigates and anti-submarine ships, roughly 300 to 400 miles from the Pakistan coast, just off. It's still in international waters, but close enough to start striking with missiles Karachi, that main port. Now, that was important for Pakistan because Karachi handles 60% of the country's trade, as well as, of course, of being its naval headquarters. But clearly, it became very apparent that both sides did want to de-escalate. It's clear then, or certainly at this stage, things may change, but at this stage, it does actually point, all the evidence points to the fact that India launched all this essentially as with another agenda in mind. Certainly there's an anti-Sikh, anti-Punjab element to this. They took the opportunity to pound the Punjab with missiles and all sorts of attacks, but also to try and shore up Modi's and the BJP support in forthcoming elections. That does seem to be what it's all about. Now, sadly, as part of all this, the Harmandir Sahib, the Golden Temple itself, was blacked out yesterday as part of public safety and preparedness drills across the Punjab. This is a very sad thing for the Sikh community to see, that they actually, as part of a drill, they had to black out the Harmandir Sahib, and because potentially it could have become a target. And they obviously didn't want this sacred site to be targeted. So like in the Second World War, the blackouts we had in London and in the UK to stop enemy bombers being able to locate and identify targets, the Harmandir Sahib blacked itself out so that it couldn't be identified as a target. And but there was this, and generally it sets out this belief, this perception that, of course, the Sikhs in the Punjab and all the sacred sites like Gurdwaras, which have been bombed, that they are potential targets of, well, allegedly Pakistan, but clearly more likely, sadly, from India itself. India may take advantage of the situation to start bombing sacred sites in the Punjab. And indeed, we do know in Poonch, in Jammu Kashmir, locals revealed that a mandir and a mosque were also damaged, along with the local Gurdwara, amongst some indiscriminate shelling going on between the two nations. And many social commenters are suggesting India's reporting around the Sikh deaths and Gurdwara damage are being used deliberately to provoke Sikh emotions, because millions of Sikh families live close to the Pakistan border, putting them, of course, in the firing line. Now, interestingly, India has, when this all kicked off, and this to me is a really important element to all this, notwithstanding all the sad deaths and destruction. X, that's the former Twitter platform, released a statement last week. They said the Indian government have ordered it to block users in the country from accessing more than 8,000 accounts, including a number of international news organisations and other prominent users. Now, X didn't release this list of accounts it was blocking in India, but said the order amounts, in its words, to censorship of existing and future content, is contrary to the fundamental rights of free speech. And X briefly blocked access to the Global Affairs account from which it had posted the statement, also citing a legal demand from India. Now, this is really interesting because this proves, above everything that we've said, once again, India fears the truth. It fears platforms like X and Instagram and all these other platforms where the truth may actually be revealed. Now, it's very easy under the guise of we don't want enemy propaganda infiltrating what we're saying in India and undermining our position in India. In reality, what they're saying is, no, there is only one narrative. That is a narrative of the BJP and Modi's government. No other narrative is allowed in India. We will not allow the Indian population to hear any other point of view. That isn't democracy. That isn't freedom of speech. That implies authoritarian rule. And once again, it proves the likelihood that India instigated all this. They do not want any other narrative going on. They don't want the Indian population to know the truth. They don't want the Indian population to hear any other evidence, only what we will spoon feed you from the government. This is the only truth, the government truth. Very, very sinister, that. And I think that, above all else, proves a lot of what we're saying, that the Indian government is not feeding its population the truth. Now, Punjab itself, of course, why is Punjab so important? Punjab forms this really important battleground, sadly, and it's very sad to use that term, but lying on that border between Pakistan and India, the Punjab has traditionally, even going back to partition and way before that, the Punjab has always formed this hugely important, significant, strategic geographical area between, currently since 47, between Pakistan and India, but even before then, it still formed this barrier into the main subcontinent of India for any hordes, particularly the Mughal hordes, trying to spread down into the subcontinent of India. And this is why it has traditionally formed a battleground. And even post-47, as Moscow and the KGB had these hugely aspirational ambitions to sweep down, obviously they swept into Afghanistan in the 1970s, their goal ultimately was to sweep into Pakistan and then across into India. And they had alliances with India, with the Gandhi dynasty, and they wanted to form up this alliance with the Gandhi dynasty in India, take over Pakistan. They had plans in the 70s and the 80s to assassinate the president of Pakistan and take over Pakistan, and then form that bridge all the way from Moscow down to the Indian Ocean to include India in the Soviet Empire. The one thing standing in its way was the Punjab. The Punjab, once again, and the Sikhs in the Punjab were that obstacle that would not allow the Soviets to sweep down across into India, join their hands with India and take over Pakistan. Do watch some of my podcasts with Bhajan Singh Binder if you're interested in that sort of history. But critically, all in the recent potential conflict, these escalations tended to revolve around the Punjab, and particularly the border districts like Fazilka, Firozpur, Amritsar, of course, Gurdaspur. These were the frontline zones, and of course they were in range of military on both sides. And the cantonments in Jalandhar, Bathinda and Pathankot have already been activated militarily, transforming the Punjab basically into really a de facto militarised zone. And with that comes increased civilian surveillance, emergency security measures, all the ingredients you need to then take full control of the Punjab. Yes, here we are again. The Indian government taking advantage of the situation to increase their control of the Punjab through this direct militarisation. And of course, it's having a massive impact on the agricultural sector, just the normal civilian way of life going on, critical water infrastructure, the Indus River Treaty, of course, being a massive part of all this. And again, the accusation's been labelled at India, saying water is the key. Punjab, the Five Rivers state, of course, being the central ground for the battle over the water rights, the riparian rights to who has access to the water, whether it's India or downstream Pakistan. Pakistan saying you cannot suspend this Indus River Treaty, which India have done, because that in itself is an act of war. Now, historically, Delhi has consistently treated Punjab as a colony, effectively, to be dominated and exploited, as it has done ever since partition, particularly because the Punjab serves not just a national security element, but also food security. It is the breadbasket of India. Under current circumstances, Punjab therefore does hold this key to stability within the Indian Empire and, of course, its survival going forward. So not only is Punjab the only viable route to trade and transport goods by land through Central Asia, it's also a key logistical point for the military and also houses a fundamental challenge to the Indian state itself. Now, the Sikhs, of course, and their dissent, I would say their quiet rebellion. They can't be openly rebellious because otherwise they'll face what J&K face, which is 500,000 troops of the Indian army. But their rebellion has been subtle, nuanced, but still very much rebellious. Look at Amritpal Singh as an example. They have formed an internal threat to the Indian government. And of course, this is why the Indian government are so desperate to use and leverage this situation to clamp down on Sikh dissent. But of course, there is a bigger picture here. Global geopolitical tensions between particularly the US and China and both the Belt and Road Initiative of China and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor pushed by Pakistan. These are hugely strategic commercial concepts by both Pakistan and China. India is afraid of this. And they, of course, then further complicate this regional conflict. And Kashmir, the conflict in Kashmir combined with conflict in Punjab just basically ignites a very key strategic area that will have a massive impact commercially and of course through the river rights. And this suspension by India of the Indus Water Treaty isn't just diplomatic theatre, it is a strategic escalation. It's weaponising water against Pakistan, which Pakistan has in turn warned it is basically an act of war. And according to Al Jazeera, they've reported over the weekend that the Jenab River has already had its flows reduced, which could have catastrophic implications downstream in Pakistan. India has been making efforts, we do know, over the past several years to renegotiate the terms of the treaty, this Indus River Treaty, and it seems now to be taking advantage of this incident to do so. So, James, ultimately, notwithstanding the stand down of the militaries on both sides, it does look like India has used and leveraged the situation to take advantage of the Punjab to rip up the Indus River Treaty. It's now using it to further oppress and persecute the Sikh community in the Punjab, to take further control and ultimately to try and rip up those river rights, those crucial river rights, which are crucial not just for the Punjab but also for Pakistan, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I also think that we've seen a fairly rapid response to finding a ceasefire, because I don't believe that the world community and the geopolitical community or setting right now gave as much backing to Modi as he thought they would. I think that there was less support than he anticipated, and that really pushed things forward. Also, I think that, the geopolitical context of their foreign repression or transnational repression, that they are looking at it seriously as to whether or not it was a false flag by India, and if they have been involved in the altercations that they blamed on Pakistan. So again, I think that there's a lot that Modi's misjudging when it comes to his international support. he may be just confusing that with being able to pull the blinders over other politicians and the international community. When it comes to X, of course, they've also been accused lately of shadow banning and all kinds of different things on accounts. But again, they're not doing it at the behest of a foreign government. So I think that it was very important for Elon Musk to stand up publicly with this demand by certain countries trying to suppress the rights and the freedoms of speech outside of even their own nation. I think was just a push too far. And we saw that pushback by Elon Musk and from X. When it comes to both sides, though, as you talk about the narratives online, especially social media and online news agencies, I mean, let's face the facts that India and Pakistan, they both have very, very powerful media machines. And whether that is reporting true incidents or whether or not it is propaganda, they're both very much involved in that. And I think that the world has really exposed it on the India side. So I think there was a lot of blowback on social media as well towards Modi and the India government that he wasn't anticipating. And of course, they've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar far too often, Angus.
Indeed, and I think when we talk about the Khalistan movement, what has happened over the last week or so is actually excellent news because, I mean, obviously there's no excellent news about those who've lost their lives or had properties damaged, but ultimately in the bigger picture, when we look at the grand scheme of things for the Khalistan movement, this is really, really good what's happened because it highlights to the wider world that this conflict is always bubbling beneath the surface. It only takes a relatively small incident, these catalytic events as I often refer to. It takes these small incidents to suddenly then, or just remind the world that Pakistan and India will never really resolve their differences. There is always going to be this constant irritation, this constant tension, which can very, very quickly spill over into something a lot more serious. And therefore, we are looking for a longer term solution. And as we always say, the longer term solution is staring the world in its face. It is Khalistan. It is that establishment of that buffer zone between the two nations. So what happened over this last week has highlighted and brought to the world's attention once again, if you want to put a permanent lid on this situation to stop these two nations from ever going to war again in the future, you need to establish a buffer zone. It can be managed and governed by a single people, the Sikh population, and it can have a name on it and it can be called Khalistan. It will be a nation that will be entirely independent. It will be friendly to both sides, Pakistan and India, and of course it will be friendly to the Western democratic nations of the world because of course it will form one of the leading democracies on the planet. So ultimately, as I say, for the Khalistan movement, what has happened is actually, in the grand scheme of things, a very good thing because it's given a huge amount of ammunition to the movement to say we need Khalistan. This is why the world needs Khalistan, and I have no doubt that all the G20 leaders, if presented with this solution, will say, look at each other and say, well, why not? That's what's so important. So, anyway. James, let's move on as the clock is marching down. I want to quickly go through my second story, and I'm going to go domestic here into the UK. And I talked about this the other day, and it's a bit of an ongoing story that's gathering momentum. This is we've had huge problems here in the UK over these grooming gangs, these Muslim grooming gangs. And it has continued apace, and as a result, Sikh Youth UK, which is an organisation here in the UK which has campaigned massively for many years about many issues, but particularly they have a real thing about this grooming gang situation, which has targeted the Sikh community since, in fact, going back decades, and it was the Sikh community that raised the issue to the British government decades ago, way before anybody else did, but of course they were ignored, but yet they're at it again because sadly, it does appear that there is an alarming rise in targeted grooming in recent times, literally even over recent weeks. This child sexual exploitation and radicalisation that is particularly affecting the Sikh youth. And in just 2 weeks alone, 10 serious cases have been reported to just even one organisation, highlighting this rapidly escalating crisis that unsurprisingly demands urgent and a coordinated community action. So Sikh Youth UK have taken the lead on this, and they have called these emergency meetings. They've had in the past, in recent weeks, one in Coventry and in Leicester. These are the main centres of the Sikh diaspora here in the UK. And yesterday in Slough, they had another very well attended meeting, an emergency meeting, to discuss basically the problem, this massive, rapidly rising problem. And a spokesperson for Sikh Youth UK said over the weekend, these are not isolated incidents, this is a pattern. This is quite concerning. They're not just one-offs that's happening. There is clearly a growing pattern once again. As a community, we must respond with urgency, clarity and strength, and that means raising this issue at the highest levels of government and authority. Important statement that I'll come back to that in a moment. So as part of the initiative, Sikh Youth UK is going about educating and training Sikh organisations, gurdwaras, sports clubs and educators to identify and prevent grooming and radicalisation. They're also forming regional support teams to assist in safeguarding efforts, rolling out seminars like this one in Slough and resource materials that can be accessed online and delivered locally. And of course, on a grander scale, building a national movement to empower communities and protect future generations. Basically, well done to Sikh Youth UK, because under Deepa Singh's patronage, they are being very active, calling these community together, get-togethers to highlight the issue and say, look, we need to unite. We've got to do something about this. We've got to raise this issue if we're going to stop it escalating. It is a united stand to protect Sikhs' children, to raise awareness and begin implementing these practical solutions which I've just listed there. Yeah. Now, from a political perspective, a lot has been going on about this. A lot of, particularly the opposition, the Conservative Party and the Reform Party, have been raising this issue massively, but to a relatively deafening silence from Starmer's government. Yes, again, I mean, here we are again. For some reason, Starmer's government are not acting about the Sikh community. Why not? And even what has caused absolute outrage, and I have to say I was outraged myself when I heard this. Lucy Powell, she's a Labour MP. She is also the leader of the House of Commons, our Parliament. Lucy Powell on Question Time, a political question programme where the public are allowed to question a select group of MPs on television on the BBC. Lucy Powell was on Question Time. She was asked about these grooming gangs. Let me play you her response. This is what she responded to a member of the public when he asked why we are concerned about these grooming gangs. What are you doing about it? This is her response.
If anybody saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs over this...
we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, okay.
There was a real issue...
Let's get that dog whistle out, shall we?
Okay, Lucy.
Yeah.
The councils, there were so many people who were so afraid for good... Can I just finish the point, just for 1 minute?
Finish that point, Tim, and then I'll bring in Helen.
Look, there were so many people in local government, in the authorities, who, for good reasons, were worried about upsetting community tensions, that those girls went undefended. Now, there were good reasons for it, but no one has still been brought to justice for that. So you tell me, Lucy, that this isn't a culture in local government. It's just not true.
So ultimately, there we have a senior minister in the Labour government who's been asked why young girls, like young Sikh girls, have been attacked and sexually exploited. She calls it, oh, you want to blow that little trumpet now, do you? Let's get that dog whistle out, do you? And of course, this unsurprisingly has caused an absolute outrageous storm of protest from basically the victims, the families of the victims, and right across the political spectrum, saying, oh, so that's how you dismiss this whole issue. Well, why? There is a good answer to this. Sarah Vine wrote over the weekend. She's the wife of the former, one of the former ministers in the Conservative government, Michael Govt, who actually got heavily involved from the Conservative side in this. And she wrote, the assumption by some men of a certain ethnic group that females of another ethnic group are less virtuous and more promiscuous than their own was the root cause of the abuse. So in other words, it was actually Islamic racism within a small section of the Islamic community. Such an assumption, of course, is a racist trope. But in the case of the rape gangs, it was never challenged because it was felt that somehow the ethnicity of the perpetrators and the need to maintain cultural relations trumped the safety and dignity of the victims. In other words, you can't call it out. We couldn't deal with it because we'd be called racist. In Rotherham, one of the northern towns where this really kicked off, the cultural dimension was deliberately covered up. And the attitude that has dominated in the past few decades of rising immigration has now stopped the government from tackling this. We have a Labour government, as she says, many of whose members are an integral part of the problem. That's why they won't grant a national inquiry into this. Their prints are all over this mess. That and the fact that they face a political threat from Islamic independents, many of whom, as we've seen from social media posts, subscribe to deeply misogynistic beliefs. So what she's saying, and this is really the truth of it, is that, first of all, it hasn't been tackled because the police have been too afraid of being called racist if they start investigating Islamic groomist gangs. Secondly, the government has deliberately not launched an inquiry because the government would be implicated in being a guilty party in this. Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions when this was happening. Why did he not investigate it? Why did he prevent investigations? So the Prime Minister himself is implicated in deliberately trying to stop this happening, stop the investigations. He's covering it up because he himself will be implicated. Likewise, the Labour Party are deliberately stopping investigations because they don't want to lose the Islamic vote. They are threatened by Islamic independent MPs who are gaining votes. So they're saying, no, we will represent the Islamic community. We won't investigate these criminal gangs because we don't want to lose the Islamic vote. That's what it's all about. It is deeply corrupt. It is rotten. It is this Labour government once again proving it is no friend to the Sikh community, but also it is no friend to decency and morality. It is no representation of what the British nation stands for. It is an absolute outrage. It is disgusting. And I'm absolutely appalled, James. Should we be surprised?
I would say not, Angus, because we've seen reports before where Keir Starmer was questioned about his role, or his inactive role, we'll say, in chasing down and prosecuting individuals involved, where he tried to spin the numbers to make it appear as though when he was in the prosecutor's office or in that role, he was the one that was really going after everybody. But again, the results and the numbers just didn't corroborate with what he was claiming at that time. So it again shows that maybe his numbers were great when it came to certain areas, but as an overall, they have to focus on every individual that perpetrated these crimes, that was involved in it, and hold them accountable and not back off because of concern of being viewed as racist, Angus.
Absolutely, and well done to Sikh Youth UK for raising this issue and being so proactive in trying to raise attention to the British government to act on this. Sadly, I think they will face this brick wall, as Sarah Vine wrote. Their prints are all over this mess. Yes, the Labour government are deeply implicated in this, so they will, of course, continue to resist and bury the story as much as they can. It's an absolute outrage what's going on. So good luck to Sikh Youth UK. Well done to Deepa Singh. Keep pushing that, and well done to the Sikh community for rallying around in such large numbers to trying to raise awareness of this, and we will continue from our side to do that as well. Right, James, running out of time as always. Let's rush through into our comments section, and loads of great comments. Thank you to our wonderful audience for all your comments. And we'll start off with Avi Media, who says that I said I like Hindus. Yeah, I do. But you have a problem with Hindutva. But as you rightly say, most Hindus I know are nice, as indeed they are, but in the end they do follow Hindutva ideology. Oh yeah, sad but true. I can't deny that. They naturally, people will follow, I suppose, their cultural identity, and very many decent Hindus. I mean, we only need to go back to what happened in the Sikh genocide to see how many Hindus joined in those mobs, those mass mobs that murdered in cold blood so many Sikhs, to see how easily people are whipped up into mobs. And likewise, sadly, many Hindus, well, I'll balance that by saying many Hindus weren't, and they did provide shelter and sanctuary to many Sikhs during the genocide, so you can't paint them all with the same brush. But yeah, unfortunately, people on the whole are like sheep. They're very easily influenced, they're very easily manipulated, and unfortunately, many Hindus do follow Hindu ideology, James. Human nature.
And it's that pack mentality, once again, Angus, that we've talked about so many times when it comes to these incidents.
Indeed, but we will continue to try and endeavour to not paint all Hindus with the same brush. And we will continue to say we are not anti-Hindu, we're certainly not anti-India. We will do our best to unite as opposed to divide, which is the Hindutva ideology. TC and both Hat B, two of our regulars, both have the same comments really about fishy Sunak, as you rightly say. Sunak should have been vetted. How on earth was he allowed to basically become Prime Minister, as TC says? And we come back to this term dog whistling disappointment, absolutely. And Hat B follows up likewise, and saying that, of course, this Hindutva agenda, which they were trying to spread across into the UK, Rishi Sunak didn't ask for investigations into the Pahalgam attack. Of course, why would he? He's a Hindutva stooge. He's always supporting India against anybody else. Pakistan is a victim of Hindutva terrorist propaganda. This is why, likewise, Sunak didn't let the Avtar Singh Kandar investigation go ahead. Indeed, I think, James, we said at the time, Rishi Sunak, we know he's a practicing Hindu. We know full well what his loyalty, who his loyalty was to, and he hasn't disappointed us in that expectation.
Sometimes people are exactly as we see them for, Angus, and it's sad but true.
And indeed, James will be reporting tomorrow on a fascinating story. Is when these people leave the front line of politics, their true colours are shown, as indeed Rishi Sunak's true colours have come out. We know he's an RSS Hindutva stooge. And James, you've got an interesting story tomorrow along those same lines.
I do. Very interesting and very timely. So, yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that. I don't want to give anything away, but you'll want to be watching tomorrow for that story.
So do stay tuned for tomorrow's show on that one. Stuff to muffins. The Punjab. We talked about Punjab being this battlefield. Well, what was it all about? The drinking water, the irrigating water. As you rightly say, up until 2000, you could drink water anywhere in the Punjab. But in recent years, we've done this story a lot, James, how desperately polluted and dangerous the cancer capital of India as a result of industrial pollution of its blessed rivers, James.
That's right. Yeah, we've covered that, the environmental catastrophe that is. And it's something that's ongoing, and we need the international community, not just local. We need an international community to stand up and start demanding that they take responsibility for the environmental catastrophe. That water is the lifeline for so many, whether it's agriculture or just water in itself. I mean, it's so essential.
Indeed, and Hat B follows up again about the Pahalgam attack, and really just reiterates everything that we've said all along, is that this was all about, it was politics. The whole Pahalgam attack and then what happened following that was all about distraction tactics. Of course, India, Ajit Doval, in all sorts of trouble in the US, legally speaking. They're desperate to take advantage of the situation to destroy the Punjab and what will be Khalistan. Again, they're deliberately trying to frame Pakistan, false flag and all that. And this, as you say, is a sad and evil reality of Indian Hindutva ideology. This is the undeclared India versus Khalistan. This is really what it all boils down to, James. This is India doing its level best to prevent the growing massive momentum that is now building up behind the establishment of Khalistan.
Absolutely. And it is just a pressure cooker, but that's okay because pressure cookers mean food generally, and we love food. So we're going to be in Khalistan when this settles and when Khalistan is its own, Angus.
Indeed, and that pressure cooker is indeed building, and we do know they've either got to let it happen or it's going to blow very shortly. And Hardal Singh, it's been a great session for all our regular commenters, so thank you to all our regulars for all the comments. Hardal also follows up with, thanks Angus, proud of your grandfather's medals. Thank you very much, as was I. And Gursavak Singh, likewise, indeed, saying how proud I am indeed of my grandfather who fought with the Sikhs in northeast India during the Second World War. And good luck in such a wonderful, it was lovely to see those medals. Indeed it was, and it is a huge source of personal pride to hold up my grandfather's medals, and I do remember standing with him on many occasions talking about the Burma style situation. Of course, Burma, that area where the Sikhs fought so courageously during the Second World War and once again saved India on behalf of India once again. So Shubdeep Singh Yes, and I've said in many of our follow-ups and indeed in today's show that this is the moment for the Khalistan movement to seize. This is it. And Shupdeep follows up and says, what are you doing over there? Go and seize that moment. Absolutely, James. This is the moment that the Khalistan movement need to seize. This really is the time to go for it.
Absolutely, and that's something that you touched on very eloquently last week. So yeah, we totally agree with that. Thanks for the comment.
And interestingly, SFB, he must be over the border in Pakistan. And you say, likewise, long live Khalistan. This is the opportunities, you rightly say. May Allah make the dream of Sikhs come true of getting their land, Khalistan. I'd love to visit the other side of Punjab. Well, how wonderful it would be, James, if indeed the two sides of Punjab, which were so desperately and forcibly and violently divided in 1947, how wonderful it would be to reunite both sides of Punjab once again. If Khalistan could indeed incorporate both sides of the Punjab so it could be reunited forevermore under that yellow flag.
Be pretty amazing if part of this peace process actually saw that buffer that you were talking about earlier of Khalistan, and that it actually was able to achieve some recovery of their lands from both sides. That would be just amazing.
Yeah, and we do have, in fact, we often discuss about what should be the boundaries of Khalistan. Now, originally, I think when we discussed it, we all just assumed it would probably be a relatively small bubble of Punjab, the Indian Punjab. But now that this recent conflict escalated, it does actually create this argument, this debate. Actually, it should be extended all the way to the north, to the Chinese border up in Ladakh, all the way to the south, to the Indian Ocean, because that then forms this impenetrable buffer zone. So there now is this valid debate, this valid argument that it shouldn't just be the Punjab, it should actually be that narrow strip of land all the way down that border. Both sides should relinquish just a little bit of land, equally so, so nobody loses out unequally, and therefore Khalistan could be that narrow strip of land between the two nations. It's a no-brainer, as we say, James.
Well, to us, anyways, we only wish that a lot of politicians thought in our world there, Angus, because we could really resolve a lot of issues around the world.
If it's up to us, James, we could bring about world peace. Unfortunately, all we can do is shout about it from our small pulpit. But let's hope, indeed, that world leaders do actually realise that Khalistan is the answer. But on that note, we must bring Perspectives to a close. Please don't forget to keep these comments coming in. We've had some fabulous comments, as always, so do keep them coming in. And don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satellogetv.com if there's something you'd like to bring to our attention directly. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching, as always. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.